my name is Alyssa, and I help people get from where they are right now to where they want to be in terms of the cash flow that they want to be making. That is my specialty, is to help you bridge that gap. And I really do believe that it's 90% of it is your mindset, your willingness, your failure tolerance, your willingness to go for it, and also to anticipate obstacles and strategies. And so I help you to do that. And then we also learn the tactical skills that you need to know. Because I've been in real estate for so many years, I can help you with that. So I personally also invest, and I'm a real estate agent myself, but I have multi-seven figures of residential and commercial real estate that I own, but it didn't start there. It started with a $1 pin. So I wasn't asking myself what I didn't have, but when I started as a 13-year-old to raise money to start buying real estate, I looked at what I did have, and I was really good at arts and crafts. And so I started making these American flag pins, and I sold them at craft fairs for $1. And I had lots of siblings, so I knew how to babysit. And I would babysit for people. And I saved money, just penny, dollar by dollar, until I had $1,000. And when I had $1,000, I went to my dad and I said, "Dad, can I buy some real estate?" And instead of laughing at me, he said, "Let's go see what you can buy." And so I just want you to take a moment and say, if that's possible, that earning $1 at a time, I could buy, I'll tell you what I bought in a second. I could start in real estate. What is possible for you? Really let that sink in. The world is yours. The American dream is yours. All right. Takes a couple clicks for a minute to go to the next one. Okay. So this was me when I was 14 years old, and I bought a mobile home. Isn't that so fun? It was $1,000 and it didn't work at all. The roof was leaking, the pipes were broken, but I started there. And I borrowed some money from my parents who helped me out, and I hired someone to start fixing it up. Because I understood the principle of real estate. I understood that when you buy something, it pays you back, and it pays you extra. And so I saved those dollars that I made, and it started very small. It was just a couple $100s a month. But I saved that month after month after month until I could buy a second one. And on the second one, I was 16, so I could drive. And because I could drive, I could fix it up myself. So I was there knocking the carpet, putting in the carpet. I did all the work myself on this mobile home. And that's what you can think about right now. I want you to think about either having time that you can invest and skills that you can learn and that you're willing to learn and try new things, or money. And there's a third one that I've realized, and it's creativity. If you can see something that no one else sees, you can make a big return on your investment. And I'm going to share some stories later about that. So these are the questions that I want you to write down right now. What is holding you back? Like when you go home and you're back in reality, what would hold you back? What would be the thing that would get in your way? And then the mindset that you want to have is, how big can I go? Right? So even as a kid, I wasn't thinking about, oh, well, maybe it wouldn't work. I was like, what could this become? It could become an empire. And right, that is for all of you too. We share that vision as entrepreneurs. All right. Next. Can you just turn it to the next one for me? There we go. Okay, so this was the best investing advice that I ever received from my mentor, from my coach, who was my dad. And it was, start it today. So when you go home, I want you to figure out what is the next thing that you can do. Can you call a realtor? Can you call a lender? Can you start getting pre-qualified? Can you mow some lawns in the summer maybe? How can you make money? How can you get started? All right, so I've isolated one investment that I made, my first after college. I sold those properties and then I started again after college. And I isolated one property where I put in $34,000 as the down payment. And I just showed you what it could become because I want you to get the vision. So that property became a duplex, which I remodeled, which became some land. And I want to pause for a minute and tell you the story of the land, because this is the idea Brian and I were talking about this morning. We found a piece of land that was off market that no one knew about. We were looking at different subdivisions, and we saw that there was a piece of land that hadn't been developed. We were like, what is this about? We have a housing shortage. This was in Wyoming. We have a housing shortage. And there's this land that's just sitting there. Who is it owned by? And my husband went and knocked on the door of the owners. You can look them up. And he found that they lived out of state and that they weren't doing anything with the land. And so we made them an offer and we bought the land. And when we bought that land, we were able to divide it. I want you to be thinking how you could do this too. We divided the land and we sold it in pieces instead of all together. And we sold it to builders who could do something with it. And when we sold that land to the builders, we had a piece left for ourselves. And just by selling the land, we had made our money back. And we had made $220,000 extra dollars of cash. And we negotiated with the builder that he would build us a fourplex on our piece of land as well. And we pledged the land that we got for free for $100,000, right? We pledged that land so that he would build us a property on it and we would have recurring revenue. So we took out of the project $120,000 and then we pledged the land and now we'll have recurring revenue. That is thinking big, right? That's more maybe than we would make in our jobs in a normal year, me included, right? But you can do it with one deal and it didn't take much time. That's the creativity part. Okay, so to come back to this, that property that we started with $34,000 turned into all of this, the project that I just told you about, and cash in our hand of $220,000. And now it pays us $40,000 every year. Year after year after year after year. Real estate is stable. It's steady. It will pay you. You can negotiate harder at your regular job because you have real estate. You won't have to work your job. Okay, so in the next little while, we're going to understand what commercial property is and what it can do for you. And then I want to build the vision of real estate and what real estate itself can do for you, and then help you understand how I can help you in that process. So let's start by defining what is commercial real estate, right? What's the difference? So any units where you have 4 or more households living there, that's considered commercial. And it requires different lending and different things. Then you also have industrial properties. We have office and we have retail, like strip malls. So that's all part of commercial real estate. And I want, when you go home, for you to notice every property out in the world, someone owns that. The post office, the Target, everywhere that you go, someone owns that. And that can be you. Yeah, it's going to be you. So I want you to set your sights high just like Brian did. Okay, let's talk about the long-term safety of real estate. I want you to think about this for yourself. What is your personal definition around your money of safety? And you get to decide. So most of us were taught by our parents that our money was safe in the bank. And while that's true, it's not necessarily growing. And in fact, last year was an especially high inflation year. I had money sitting in the bank and it became worth 8% less. My money is actually worth less. Isn't that interesting? So we may need to rethink that because our parents didn't have that same problem. And then here's the thing about stocks. They're not a physical asset, so they respond to emotion. Right? And they're not much within your control in terms of what that business owner does in terms of the stock that you own. And this is the biggest one to me. You have to sell them to receive the profit. So if I want to take money out, I have to actually give up the thing that I own. Whereas with real estate, you're actually able to keep your ownership in it. It's a physical asset. Right? We're not making more land in America. That's not very easy to do. It's already there. And so when you own it, you can see that while we have had a dip recently, real estate has cycles. And overall, real estate is going up in value, and it's going up pretty rapidly. So Brian was talking about we don't invest for appreciation, but it is one of the biggest reasons to buy real estate. We just never use it in our numbers. It's like that amazing added extra. Okay, so here's the next question people often ask. Isn't real estate risky? Have you ever thought that? Well, let me tell you, you actually have a lot of control about the amount of risk that you take in your real estate. So you can buy something that has a very low return, most likely. This is just the rule of thumb. But it's very stable. It's turnkey. It doesn't require work from you, but it also doesn't return you as much money. So I love investing. I love investing on the risky side. I just do it very cautiously. I look at a lot more properties than I buy, and I'm very willing to be unemotionally attached to the sunk costs that I have in looking into that property. So let's talk about some strengths of residential and commercial real estate. Residential real estate is easy to get into. It's very similar to buying your own home. So the bar is very low, but the competition is pretty high. A lot of people can do it. And so the returns are just not as, they're pretty normal, usually. So let's talk about some things about commercial that you might not know. Commercial leases are usually 5 or more years. So when you buy that property, you already have guaranteed money for 5 years. And you can even have the seller escrow money. In case they were to leave, then you would have some money. You get to negotiate the lease. I love that part because it gives me so much power. And so when I use my brain, I can create an amazing, secure experience for myself. The next thing is, did you know that there's something, I call it the holy grail in commercial real estate. It's a triple net lease. And this lease means that as the landlord, my costs are fixed. I own the walls, I own the floor, I own the roof, and the tenant is responsible for everything else. So if the property insurance goes up, that's on the tenant. If the insurance goes up, which it has, that goes to the tenant. And if there's any maintenance that needs to be done, I'm not in charge. That's the tenant's responsibility. We call this mailbox money because money literally comes into your mailbox when you're doing this type. So with commercial, it can be more complex, but I'm grateful for that because it means that fewer people are in competition. Fewer people are getting into commercial real estate. It just takes a little bit more understanding and knowledge. And if you hire mentors and coaches to help you with that, you can be asking the right questions that you otherwise wouldn't know to ask. All right, so let's talk about this difference. Did you know that commercial and residential real estate is valued differently? Residential real estate, the appraisers look at comparable sales. What have homes nearby sold for? And the problem with that is that it's dependent on things like appreciation and inflation and the market, and those are not in your realm of control. So what your property is worth is somewhat within your control, but when we talk about commercial, it's very in your control because you can increase your income or you can decrease your expenses in commercial real estate, and appraisers just take whatever number you made, your net operating income, and they multiply it by a number, and they get your value. So I'm gonna give you an example to make this really obvious, really helpful. This is a story from my dad. So my dad owned 200 units, and he bought this property, and the city was taxing it in a was charging for the dumpsters on that property in a very interesting way. They were charging a lower price for the first dumpster and a higher price for the second dumpster. Okay, we're way in the weeds, but there's a point. They were looking at each of those individual 200 units as their own thing, as their own property. And my dad called the city and he said, look, I own this whole property. Why don't you give me the discount on everything, on all 198 of these and charge me, because it was the first two and then after that there was a discount. So he talked with them and they said, okay, we'll give you the first two at the higher price and then 198 at the lower price. And that difference in the dollars to him in a year was $29,000. He saved $29,000 a year, which was profit to him by one phone call. And do you know what's so cool about that? It's that after making the phone call, okay, next, thank you. So if you value commercial property in the income approach way, you take that and you times it by the cap rate, which is 8%, and he just added $233,000 of value to that property. So if he were to sell the property before versus after, it is now worth $233,000 more dollars. Isn't that incredible? With one phone call. We can't do that in residential real estate. It just doesn't work that way. Here's a second idea of a way to increase the value of your commercial real estate quickly. And that is that the value of the property itself actually changes based on how long is left on the lease, because the lease is your security. And so if you can negotiate with the same tenant that's already been there to sign a 10-year lease instead of a 5-year lease, the value of the property will actually go up. Isn't that incredible? These are just some of the fun ways to play with real estate, with commercial real estate especially. It's so much creativity. All right, so you might be wondering, this is a question I often get. What are my options to invest in commercial real estate, and what is my risk with each option? So I want to actually show you some properties that I personally own. And these are ones that are very doable. These are returns that are very steady, and I'm going to tell you why I like them. So this property is in an amazing area of town. It's right next to the biggest street in the whole city, but it looks like it's in the middle of nowhere, right? So here's what's so cool about buying this property. It's a piece of land. But do you notice that there's a tiny home on it? This 492 square foot home actually makes me get an amazing return while I sit on land that will be developed later. And as I bought this property, I met with the city and I said, can we develop this land? And we can. So someday this is a development project for me and it's in the middle of the city, but every year I make $4,500 by owning this property. Isn't that incredible? Yeah, so I love doing this. If you own real estate, I want you to go home and do this with your own properties. I just had this idea that I wanted to compare apples to apples of everything that I owned, and I wanted to see which ones were better. And so I want you to compare and convert the money that you make in it to if you owned $1 million of this asset. And I'm going to show you 3 properties and how they compare. So if I owned $1 million of this asset, I would make $70,000 of my total return per year, excluding appreciation, because that can go up and down. All right. The next one, this is a breaks for less. And the beauty of this property is that it's getting paid off in 20 years instead of 30. I love that. Also, this is one of those triple net properties where I don't have to pay taxes or insurance or do any repairs. I'm in charge of the metal roof, the cinder block walls, and the ground. What's going to go wrong there? Pretty much nothing. Right? So I love this one. And if I owned $1 million of this one, I would also make $70,000 a year. They're very similar, even though they look so different, don't they? All right. And the other thing I want to tell you is that you don't have to invest fancy. Like I could own a Kentucky Fried Chicken or something, but I also could just own something that's a medical office that looks like this. So this property is a medical office, and the 3 ends, that's what means triple net. So I get emails to my inbox that they maintained the air conditioner. I wrote it into the lease, and then they do that. All right, so this one had a larger down payment, and it has a slightly lower return, but I'm very happy with this return, right? My income is guaranteed for a long period of time. The person who's there, the medical doctor, has been there for a long time. So these are just a few examples of properties that these are very accessible to you, right? The land deal, we got a lot going on. We got a lot of risk. This is just very simple. This is doable for you now. And remember what it will become worth over time. All right, so when I'm sitting down with my people who I'm helping invest, we get to ask these types of questions. And I want you to take out your phones and actually screenshot these questions for when you are looking at your first property. You can ask yourself, what is the highest and best use? What value am I adding? What is the best thing that could happen here? And what is the worst thing that could happen here? Does it cash flow immediately? And especially, does it fit my long-term goal? Because you need to know what you're going to be doing at the end before you ever get started. Like Brian was talking about, we want that. We want to know our exit strategy, and I like to have several. A quick exit, a long exit. What could prevent this from working? And does this make sense with the competition? And I want to say that you can find data, for instance, of how many properties have been coming on the market of, like, let's say you're buying a 30-unit multifamily apartment. You can know how many of those have been coming on the market in that exact area every year. And I can help you know that information, right? We can look it up. And then we can see what's coming up in the next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, because that will affect your rent. So we have a lot of metrics that we can look at, but it's asking these questions that's where your mind needs to be. All right. Okay, so I am so honored to be brought in as part of your community. It's delightful to me. And I see each of you, and I want you to succeed. So I have set aside time in my calendar for the next several weeks that I will sit down with you for an hour, and I will help you look at your exact financial situation, where you are, and what amount of passive income or active income, if you want to create a big chunk, right? Like I did with that property. And we will look at what your situation is, and I will explain to you my process so that you come away with clarity of what you want and what's preventing you from getting there. And I will tell you, it was most likely a mindset thing. That is what I find, for me included. And then overall, you'll just know if you would like my help to help you invest in commercial or residential real estate. I help educate. I can teach, and then I can help you break through those blocks that you have so that you can think bigger and reach the success that you want to create in your life. And I use a special pro forma deal calculator, and why I use this particular calculator that I built is because I can know if a property is a yes or a no within 5 to 10 minutes. And knowing that a property is a no is as valuable as knowing it's a yes. Sometimes your best investment is not to invest. And so I will send you this deal calculator when we have that consultation together so that you can now have that forever going forward. So scan the QR code, take out your phone right now, and just find a time while you're here and while you're in the energy that we can sit down and I can just free complimentary help you so that you can get started on your real estate journey and actually make it happen. This is your way for you to ensure that what happens here, actually you take action on, that it goes from concept to reality. And I want to kickstart that for you.